us know in the chat if you feel so inclined. And with that introduction, we are now open for questions. And we will wait a moment. If anybody would like to raise a hand or pose a question in the chat, we'd love to hear from you.
And actually, I'll start it off while we wait for folks. Paula, that was actually one I was going to look at. Let's see. I think I have Paula. Here we are. So Paula sent an email that said that she's an attorney whose practice focuses on planning for incapacity, and she's committed herself to supporting and assisting in self-determination. So she had two questions. In our county in California, which currently isn't one of the innovation counties, there's hardly any availability, let alone choice of treatment options for Medi-Cal eligible persons. Even a county conservator cannot access a preferred option. Without significant change, there's a lot more funding to construct more facilities, and patient choice, which is in some cases is a secure acute care or subacute care facility, will likely not be available. How is the PAD program working within these constraints? So I think the first answer to that is this is part of what innovations is looking at exactly what we're going to be doing in California and how we are going to work within constraints, and how we change some of those options. And so I wish I can give an answer that's just concrete, but that's not what innovations is. And I think that that's been kind of a misconception on this project, is that we have it all figured out and we're just going to roll forward with something that's figured out, and it's not. So we will be utilizing the voice of our 5 counties that are participating, as well as multiple peer and consumer groups, in order to move our efforts forward. So I actually suggest that you keep looking and you watch and follow the project and put your input in as we continue forward. We will be looking at legislation. We will be looking at how to better engage our hospitals, our medical facilities, our IPUs, our law enforcement, to really look at self-determination and not about building more facilities. So that is actually not at all part of our project, just so everybody's very clear. It is about self-determination and creating a PADS template. We will at no time be talking about facilities. That is not actually part of even MHSA funding. So this is an MHSA funded project. So I'd like to thank you for your comment, and we will move to another one. Do we have any in the chat?
We have Anne. Did you want to unmute yourself, Anne, and ask your question? I see it in the chat, but I'd love to hear from you.
Oh, there we go.
Well, I will then ask Anne's question she wrote in the chat.
Oh, yeah, I'm wondering if you think a PAD can be an alternative to committing someone to an assisted outpatient treatment program.
Lori, can you?
So yeah, so that's the great thing about PADS, right? Is that PADS can be a way for people to avoid the cycling that leads to the effort to go forward with AOT, right? They are a way to demonstrate that we have the ability to adjust the supports and services to what the human being wants. And by doing that, what it means is that not only will the person be able to access the supports and services that they need to remain integrated, but it also means that we won't have to make a horrible choice when it comes to removing people's rights. So it's a way to reduce the cycle of recidivism through self-determination without having to violate people's rights. So that's my answer. I turn it over to anyone else who would like to. I think that PADS can make AOT less needed and less used. I'll turn it over to someone else.
We'll go on a follow-up question, probably interesting one from Paula. Because unfortunately, those of us who are working for more available options in such secure facilities too often find a hostile opposition from groups that are advocating for civil rights and self-determination. We also want what's best for our loved ones and to a degree possible to honor their desires. How can we work together rather than at cross purposes? Jonathan, can you take this?
Thank you, Chris. And thank you, Paula. It's a great question. And I think it's more than a question. I think it's a mission statement. I think, for as long as there's been people with psychiatric disabilities before America, there has been this struggle, this us versus them idea that everything has to be one way, it has to be the other way. And I don't think it works. I don't think it has served people very well. So I think the first thing we have to do is commit to working together rather than across purposes. There are certain values, I think, that we can all grab onto, that we all have. And it's in your question. We all want what's best for our loved ones. We all want to ensure self-determination. If we start there, if we start with that value, then it's very easy to move forward together, because the first thing we have to think about then is how we take that value and we operationalize it. The last thing that we want to do, the last thing, is to say that there is only one way to operationalize that value. That's like saying everyone is exactly the same, which we know. Every parent on this call, every professional, every peer knows one thing. My life is not your life. My experience is not your experience. But we can all start with a value like we should ensure self-determination whenever possible. We should want the best for people. And we can start that by looking at people as individuals. No more they, no more the people with psychiatric disabilities, no more everyone who experiences psychoses. It should be what this person has experienced, what that person experiences well, what works for each person. And that is the beauty of this project, because this project is committed to looking at each person, how he or she responds to certain things, how he or she wants to be addressed, the medication that works for that person, so that we don't have to say the answer is only building more facilities, or the answer is only opposing people and saying only my way is the right way. I say we start with your value, Paula, that we all want to ensure self-determination, and we look for each person what that means. And again, that's the beauty of a PAD. It asks that person and that person's supporters what works best for you. And like Kieran said, there's no magic wand for this. There is nothing we are going to do that is going to cure thousands and thousands of years and of people at cross purposes. But what we can do is start to build a bridge between people by starting with the value that you espoused. Thank you.
I'm wondering if Claudia Vargas, would you be interested in giving your feedback on that?
Sure. I definitely agree with Jonathan and the idea that at the end of the day, we want the best for ourselves and our loved ones, right? And that starts with really honing into the individual and what their needs are and what their wants are in their own journey, right, to recovery. So I think the more that we focus on like the individualized, what matters to that person, what recovery and what winning looks like for that person, the better. And that's something that you can definitely start exploring with the PAD.
Thank you, Claudia. We've got some more questions. Thanks, everyone. We look forward to all of them. This is from Baby Smith. In my work in North Carolina with people living with psychotic disorders, one of the essential pieces that helps people move towards recovery is access to quality community-based treatment. The coordinated specialty care model is a great example and is designed to be voluntary and to include person-centered treatment with a heavy emphasis on engagement and careful response to crisis management. CSC is an early intervention model, but the principles can apply across a life course. Lori, can I get your feedback real quick?
I think that model sounds great. I mean, that's what pads are all about. What does the person want and need? And then figuring out how to make the services based on what the person states they want and need. And so that's really the whole goal. Everyone together working to implement the supports and services that the person has identified that they need in order to live the life that they want, a meaningful life integrated into the community.
This
Thank
is
you.
Tristan. I can chime
Go
in here
ahead, Tristan.
too.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'm a person with schizophrenia, and you know, I experienced psychosis many times in my life. I like several things that you said about community-based treatment. You know, I've been forcibly hospitalized and jailed before, and those kinds of experiences are very traumatic for generations, or not generations, for decades to come, right? It's like if we had a really robust, layered, sort of cooperative, voluntary community system, we could probably eliminate a lot of these long-term forced hospitalizations and institutionalization. I think I like the emphasis on the community. I like the emphasis on voluntary, and also we need to make the mental health services interesting and dynamic enough that people will want to join them. Unfortunately, a lot of our mental health system is just gloom and doom, you know, stand in line, take medicine, you know, watch bad television. And I think when we make a dynamic, good, you know, quality voluntary system, it will be much better for everyone.
Thank you, Tristan. I was wondering about Dr. Schwartz. Marvin, you're there in North Carolina.
Yeah, I think BB's point about these programs is well taken. There are innovative models out there, and you know, if part of the innovation project is about this, those are the sorts of programs that really are worth looking into, because they, you know, work hard early on to engage people with schizophrenia or emerging psychoses, and try to engage them in treatment and supported employment and supported education early on, hopefully to, you know, avoid, you know, alienation from treatment.
So may I step in for a sec?
Sure, Alan.
Yeah, I mean, I think we should not be thinking so much about more ways to force people to get treatment, but ways to get people to want treatment. That's a much more sustainable solution than using force, and it's also more respectful of the patient. And I think of a study with 3 groups. So the first group, get on meds, helped a lot, committed. At the other end of the spectrum are people who won't take meds or keep trying to stop meds. And the third group is people in the second group moving to the first group. And studying what gets people to want to kind of tip is, I think, a really interesting question. If we studied that, we could get more people care without, you know, having to use force.
Thank you, Ellen. It looks like we've got 11 new messages, so we'll move on. Next, this is Mary Ann Bernard. I submitted written questions that go to the heart of the subject matter. How do you get mental health professionals to follow a PAD since they apparently aren't legally enforceable in California? Please address these questions. Karen, do you want to go, and then Lori?
Actually, you know what? Jonathan raised his hand first.
Okay, yeah,
so I'm going to let him go.
Please, yeah, that's a legal question.
Thanks, Chris. And thank you, Marianne. I'm going to start my answer with a confession. And that's this. I'm not naive. I'm a trial lawyer. So the things I'm about to tell you are not coming from a kumbaya place. But here's what I know. And I have spoken in almost every state and spoken with professionals across this country. Mental health professionals got into this field for one reason and one reason only. They got into this field to help people live their best lives. Now, definitions of what that means can differ. But here's something that I think Dr. Schwartz would agree, and I think every mental health professional would agree with me. Professionals want to do that which helps and that which works. And if the question is, how do I get a mental health professional to do something, that's my answer. You show the mental health professional it's the right thing, it will help, and that it works. And that's what this project is about. The idea of the pad, while not new, has not really entered the mainstream yet. That's what we're trying to do, is to show that self-determination, to show what Paula said earlier, that we all have similar values carries, that we show mental health professionals that this is the right thing to do, not just morally, but scientifically. We have 40 years of studies that say that when people with disabilities have more self-determination and more self-control, not only is their life better, not only do they feel better, their health is better. They are better at accepting and adjusting to new healthcare needs. So our goal with this project, among other things, first and foremost being empowering people, is empowering mental health professionals to do their job as well as possible, to do the job they got into this field to do. So to me, while I do think, by the way, that PADS can and should be enforceable, just like any other advance directive, and I think there is a very good argument to be made on that, I would much rather look at the not enforceability, but the applicability, the opportunity that PADS give, not just people with psychiatric disabilities, but the mental health professionals who got into this field to support them. So that's how I would get them to comply with a PAD, by showing them that it works. And that's what this project is about.
Thank you, Jonathan. We've got a bunch of more questions in here, and I think that we should keep rolling. This also
Chris,
is.
could I jump in on that?
Oh, by all means, please.
Yeah, sorry. So just to add to what Jonathan was saying, which I agree with, is, one of the objectives of this project is to educate mental health professionals about PADS. What we found, the work we've done in North Carolina, is that while some providers might have some resistance to the idea, once you educate them about them and how PADS can be a win-win for everyone, and doesn't take away their ability to treat people, people get on board. So I think, the important part of this is to work with mental health professionals, with hospital systems, with other agencies, to understand what PADS are and how to work with them, so that it's not an issue of enforcement so much as education.
Thank you very much. The next question: is there the possibility of judicial override, at least when the patient is dangerous to self or others? If so, how would this work? Lori?
Yeah, so my understanding is that if a person is a threat to self or others, they're a threat to self or others, and the process that would normally take place takes place. So there's no conflict there. But the great thing is that with the PAD, with the supports and services that are shifted to be able to be based on what the person wants, hopefully, just like this is an innovation project, right? The whole goal is to prevent getting to that point in the first place. So that's one of the really exciting things about an innovation project, is that hopefully we'll avoid getting to that point. But if that point is reached, threat to self or others is threat to self or others.
Yeah, if I could jump in, I think it's really important to note this too, that this project is not designed to take away any available remedies. It's not designed to do away with conservatorship, do away with any processes. I wouldn't be involved with it if it was. My godson's in conservatorship, and thank God for it, because my sister can help him do the things that he can't do. So if this was a project about removing those possibilities, I wouldn't be in it. What this project is about is supplementing. It's about building. It's about finding ways to make things that should be, according to California law, the last resort, the actual last resort. So again, I'm so sorry, Ms. Aiello, I keep quoting you, but I think we should start with the value that Paula Aiello espoused. We start with the idea of maximizing self-determination while knowing that there may come a point where something else needs to be done. but doesn't it make sense to start with empowerment before removal?
So I think, this is Marvin again, I think an important addendum to what Lori and Jonathan said is, a PAD asks the provider to consider other alternatives to involuntary commitment. If there's a way to resolve a crisis without involuntary commitment. But if it is overridden and involuntary commitment occurs, that doesn't throw out the PAD, because the providers are still instructed to follow the rest of the PAD as best they can, including accepting a voluntary, at some point down the road. So all is not lost if for some reason the episode starts with a commitment. The provider is still instructed to honor the rest of the PAD.
Thank you all. On we go. Are there successful models in other states that take away only the right to make medical/psychiatric decisions when the mentally ill patients lack capacity and cannot be persuaded to act in their own best interests? Perhaps using due process or an irrevocable friendly type decision maker with a judicial override is a friend if the friend is not acting in the patient's best interests. I don't know if I read that great. I mean, this is much a similar question. Jonathan?
Yes, you just described conservatorship as it's supposed to work. In guardianship in other states, the way it's supposed to work. The way those systems are supposed to work is just at that point when a person is not able, truly is not able, even with supports to make his or her own decision, what the court is supposed to do then is find what you would call a friendly third party to assist that person in making decisions. I had one case where a judge said the entire point of conservatorship is not to make decisions instead of a person, but to make the decisions that person would make were he or she able. So the process you discussed is exactly the way conservatorship is supposed to work. I think there needs to be more education on how it could work and how it's supposed to work. But just about every state I've been in, which is most of them, has exactly that model that you laid out, at least in its code. Of course, there's more work to be done in education to make sure it does that work that way. But like I said before, we're not here to take that process away. That process is and can be invaluable when people need it. But again, we start with, and I see Ms. Aiello in the chat saying I'm allowed to quote her, so I'm going to quote her again. We start at a place of self-determination, and we take that away only when it's necessary. And when we do, we make sure that we are still maximizing self-determination and choice wherever we can.
And that's what the PAD does, right? To piggyback off of what Jonathan was just saying, is that the PAD is a way to prepare in advance for a crisis, among other things. And so if one of my concerns is that if I go into a mental health crisis, I may have financial situations that occur, I can plan in advance for that, right? This is what gives me the opportunity to go, you know what? In advance, I can foresee what could happen if I go into a crisis. And this is my way of being able to prepare for that so that I can maintain my decision making. Because guess what? If one of the challenges is for maintaining my rights to my own ability to make decisions for myself, is that if I go into crisis, X, Y, and Z can occur. Well, then the great thing about the PAD is that I get to go ahead and make that plan in place. Go ahead and put it in place to deal with the problem before it occurs. And so that way I still get to keep my decision-making ability, and it reduces the need for overly restrictive other forms of, overly restrictive other things.
Thank you, Lori. So there's two questions that are similar that I'm going to put together right now. So do you agree the PADs are enforceable in California? If so, is consideration being given for adopting a separate PAD statute that would make them enforceable? And how can they be drafted so that they are useful even if unenforceable? And then also, PADs are not currently legally binding in California, but before fully launching this It's a $17 million project. Have you obtained guarantees that pads will be legally binding? Currently, if a person with a serious brain disease is in psychosis, they can simply say they do not want the pad honored and it won't be honored. Lori?
So there were a number of questions there. Can we break them up? I'm sorry. I can't hold that many
so-
things in my mind at once.
Unenforceable in California is basically if it's not currently legally binding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the
How
first
can
question.
they be drafted so they're useful even if unenforceable? It's kind of the basic.
Okay, so
reason.
I'll let Kieran take the question about the new legislation, if there's going to be something like that. Absolutely, they can be drafted so that they can be used and very useful without. This is best for everybody. And so I think that education and training and really looking at the issues that a PAD has the ability to address together, that is what is going to improve its ability to be used in the state of California before you even get to the enforcement component. Because you don't need enforcement if people are understanding that the value to everybody concerned. So that's that one. I think there was a next question, Chris, and then I'll turn it back to, oh, sorry. I thought there was a.
It's again.
I did
again,
hear
the same.
there were a couple of other ones there. I can address a couple of them if you don't mind. The question was, before launching this $17 million project, did we get guarantees that pads would be enforceable? Again, I'm not naive and neither is anyone on this call. If a politician guaranteed you a law would get passed, would you believe it? So no, we didn't ask anyone to sign a blood oath that pads would be absolutely enforceable before we began this project. And here's why. Because we believe, at least I believe, in people. I believe that people with psychiatric disabilities have the same rights as everyone else. I believe that people ought to have the same rights as everyone else. And I believe that people ought to be given the same opportunities as everyone else. That doesn't require a politician to guarantee me a law. What that requires is that we all start from the same place. And that place is the Declaration of Independence. That starts with saying that we all have rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and building from there. So no, there are no guarantees. I think, though, the concerning part, if I may call it that, of the question is that it's being asked about whether the pad will be enforced against the person. Like if a person disavows his or her pad, the pad won't be followed. That's got it exactly backwards, in my opinion, because the pad is designed to empower the person's preferences and the person's choice, consistent again with 40 years of studies saying that leads to a better life. If a person is in psychosis and disavows his or her pad and is a danger to him or herself, Laurie said this very well. The exact same remedies are available as for anyone else. There is a judicial process. There is a conservatorship process to both protect the person and protect society. If the question, though, is if a person agrees to a pad, will that person be required to follow his pad? That's kind of like saying, are you required to follow something that you agreed to today but no longer agree with? It goes both ways, ma'am. It does not, a pad is not enforced against someone. A pad is complied with by both sides. And if a person refuses his or her preferences in a pad and is himself or herself in danger, there's a process for that. But as Laurie said, the idea is to maximize opportunities and minimize risks. And scientifically speaking, that's exactly what pads do because it's based on study after study saying that's what works.
Can I jump in, Chris? So let me just take another slant on this. So there's, since advanced directives started in the medical side, there have been 27 states now that have passed separate PAD statutes. And for all but I think one of the features of that statute was to make them self-binding. And that the idea was that during a period of incapacity, that a person couldn't change their mind about what they had requested in the pad. Now, that aspect of it is somewhat controversial. I'm just reviewing the statute issue. That is a controversial issue because it's a little bit different than medical advance directives, where people generally aren't required to bind themselves to the document. So if you're in an ICU and you said, I don't want to be intubated, and you start to have respiratory failure, even though your advance directive might say, I don't want to be intubated, no doctor is going to say, wait, you wrote here not to be intubated, and so we're going to follow that. The idea of the statutes in most of those states is to make it irrevocable, but in some states, the newer statutes have allowed the consumer to make it either binding or not binding. I believe in the state of Washington, the consumer can opt whether to make it revocable or irrevocable during a period of incapacity. So there's some nuances to these separate PAD statutes that California, I think, would want to consider.
And just to answer the aspect of legislation and California is we don't ever, and I've said it many times, we don't ever want legislation to lead a project or process. We would like the project and process to lead the legislation. So as we move forward with PADs and conversations with law enforcement, with providers, with peers, with parents, with all aspects in our counties, we want to be able to create legislation that makes sense for PADs, for the project, and for California. So there is no current easy answer right now. But the idea is that we will be able to get together as a state, as multiple counties and multiple providers, to be able to create the appropriate legislation for California and for our peers and consumers, not the other way around. So that's what I wanted to say on legislation. Thanks
so much, Karen. So next up, I'm just going in order. Psychosis is a unique disability that can involve anosognosia and delusional thought processes that should not be lumped in with other disabilities. Will you delineate the unique features of these brain diseases in PADS to make the people who will be reading and executing the patient's wishes aware of how psychosis distorts reality, renders a person unable to use self-determination in their treatment, and when they're incapable of rational thought?
Can I take that one?
You got it, Lori.
What a great question. I'm so glad that you raised this issue because it gives me the opportunity to tell you about one of the truly great things about PADS, which is that we don't have the problem of whether or not a person accepts a diagnosis or that's not a problem. It's not a barrier to being able to create a PAD and obtain the benefits of PADS, because what a PAD is doing is it's looking at the concrete issues that are the problems that need to be addressed, right? So if my problem, if one of my issues is that I'm not leaving my apartment, or I have a problem leaving my apartment, I feel scared because of certain manifestations of my illness, then a PAD enables us to do really concrete problem solving about what the actual issue is. There's no barrier of I need to accept the label, because it's all about problem solving. And that is the really great thing. And that's the other thing that's so wonderful about California and the innovation projects, which is that it really gives us the chance before we get to that point to be able to set a plan in place, to be able to ground what we're doing in self-determination so that the person doesn't reach that point. So you can get it from on the kind of the back end where there's no barrier to being able to do a PAD based on acceptance of a diagnosis. It doesn't matter. because we can address the issues that are the problems that are derived from that within the pad without a barrier when it comes to a label. But then the great part about the innovation stuff is that on the front end, we can use the pad to prevent someone from going down those life trajectories because they will be able to access the supports and services that they want and need. And then again, because it's an innovation project and the focus is on prevention, and because they're studied, that's what's so great, is that this is an innovation project and we'll see what happens. So that's thrilling for me. I can't wait to see what happens. And I think maybe Jonathan, would you like to take some of this one?
Lori, I think you hit it on the head. And I was just looking through the chat box, and at the risk of usurping Chris's job, I think your question really feeds into another one that was asked about the difference between a person's best interests and a person's expressed interests, and how sometimes when people are experiencing psychosocial disabilities or psychosis, they may not make decisions that are in their best interests. And your answer to this last question is actually quite a perfect answer to that question, because the point of the pad is to problem solve so that when you get to the point where a person may not be making decisions in his or her best interest, there's a plan in place. That's the important part of it, is because we don't know what's going to happen. I tell people all the time, if you don't have a power of attorney, you should. At some point, you should. There is a power of attorney on me that if something happens to me, I've got someone who I know and who I trust, who knows how I think and who believes in what I believe, who will be there for me. That's the point of the pad, is so that right now I can work with people I trust. I can work with my circle of support, my friends, my go-to people, to set up a plan for what should be done for those times when I'm not in my best possible place, when I may not be able to make the best decisions. I can say in my pad, if I'm doing this, that, or the other, call Laurie. If this happens, call Tristan, call Ellen, call Chris. I want to speak with Ms. Bernard when I've got a relationship issue. If there's a question of self-determination, I want to speak with Paula Aiello. Why? They've got the values I have. And if I'm not able to express them, I trust them to do it for me. So the question of best interests versus expressed interests, to me, is a false choice when it comes to a pad. Because making the pad gives the person the chance to say what he or she wants in their best interests for times when they're not able to express that.
Thank you, Jonathan, and usurp away at any point. So I'd like to hear from some of our peer speakers responding to this question. And maybe we'll put it to Paul Eisenhower first, if you'd like to. How do you respond to family members who say that their loved ones are too ill and lack insight into having mental illness so that they would not do a pad or have capacity to do a pad? Paul?
Thank you. I speak from my own lived experience, and I can tell you that pads are all about your own choice and you're having options. I can tell you, I go to a doctor and I chose him, and we may not agree on everything, but we cooperate and we negotiate and we work together. But that's my choice. It's different when you don't have a choice and you're taken to a doctor you did not choose to go to, and you're taking medications that you don't want to take, and you're given a diagnosis you don't agree to. But if you're given the opportunity to choose for yourself, it's much different. And pads are about options. You may not know all the medications out there, so you may not say, if I have a problem, I want this, but you can say, I don't want something that's going to impair my ability to get up in the morning and do what I need to do and live my life and the things that are important to you. And you can put these things in there. And it's all about negotiating your options. And it's not just options for you. These are options for everyone else, your doctor. You're not taking away power from your doctor. You're giving him power. You're saying, this is what's important to me. Meet my needs. He works for you. He's my doctor. he works for me, meet my needs. And it's like, what if you just say he's got schizophrenia, deal with it? That's not addressing the issue. If it's the issue is I stay up 7 days in a row because I'm not sleeping. Well, maybe we can work on what you need to do to sleep. So so it's not such easy thing as like you get this label and a pill's going to fix it and an institution is going to keep you safe. But I think pads are all about keeping you in control and giving you options, because if I'm ever hospitalized and because crisis can happen to anyone, I might have some medical emergency and they might give me some drug and I might become psychotic, and the next thing I know, I end up in some nursing home and they're kind of going, I'd have my pad that says, this is what's important to me, and this is how I want to be treated, and this is how I want to be respected. Because I've been out of the hospital for decades, but you can always go back. I've seen it happen where people have been out for 30 years and the next thing they're in the hospital and nobody knows them. And what do we do with them? Well, they don't have a pad that says, this is what's important to me. If you let me go do this, man, I take care of myself and I'm much better. So pads are about options. So thank you.
Thanks, Paul. I want to do a little follow up with you because part of the question is saying there are family members too ill to actually do a pad or have the capacity to do one. So what's the process in being able to get to that point?
Well, when you say they are too ill to create a pad, are you saying that they can't make choices? If you offered them an ice cream cone and you said, do you want chocolate or vanilla? I'm sure they could make a choice. I want the chocolate or this. I think I'm this one. I don't know about chocolate. I don't know about vanilla, but intuitively, I think this one is the right thing. Or do you want to do something with me? I don't know. I feel weird around you. I don't know if I trust you. You intuitively react to things. You might be too ill, as you say, to understand things. I mean, I work with lawyers. I don't understand all the legal jargon. Does that mean I'm incompetent? I mean, but I can make choices. If you give me the opportunity, I can make choices for myself.
Thank you very much, Paul. Tristan, do you have any insight here? Did you want to say anything?
Yeah, I'll kind of echo a lot of what Paul said. I think, I am a person with schizophrenia, and I know that there were times in my life when, there was a lot of choices I wasn't making well. But I think I go back to what Paul said. Some choices people can make, and we could focus on what choices the person can make, rather than say, okay, this person can't make any choices, so just forget about their, choice altogether. We could kind of focus on what are some of the choices they can make. And then work from that space. And again, I like to say what's been echoed throughout this question and answer is that we want to return as much agency as we can to the person experiencing the psychosis or mania or depression or whatever mental health challenge they're going through. It is a hard question. And I know my family suffered a lot with me, when I was going through my psychosis for a variety of reasons. I think that they wanted me to do certain things. But I will come back to, a lot of what Ellen was talking about, which was, if we force people to do things, what happens when we stop forcing them? Okay, are we going to force them forever? Like you're in a court appointed program for 3 months, or you're in a court appointed program for 6 months. It's like we need to build a system that's interesting, dynamic enough, and really honors the choices we can make so that we join, right? Like I made that decision to work with my mental health team. I really got this lesson from another peer. I'll just say that. My friend Gordon, he passed several years ago, but he was about 20 years older than me. So when I was in my mid 20s, he was almost 50. And we started talking, and he was talking to me about medication and the importance of working with a mental health team. He was a peer, and he got me to kind of buy into that system. And if we work from that space of how to get people in, how to honor their choices and to connect with them as much as possible. Too often, I think when people looked at me, when I was, really, really going through my difficult times, they said, forget Tristan, there's nothing he can do. And I like what Paul talks about, if there is some choice there, can we work with those little choices that people can make, and can we honor those as much as possible? That's how I would answer that question.
Thank you, Tristan. Another question here. Would peer counseling programs help out with PADS with the mental health community? Can respite house be an option if PADS are available within the community? Can MHSA funds be used for respite house as an alternative to psychiatric health treatment? Karen?
Yes, Mental Health Services Act funds can actually, housing is part of what we call our CSS, or our Community Services and Supports component. It's literally each county receives a portion of the MHSA funding from the state. So each county is responsible for creating a plan on how they're going to utilize the funding. So you can absolutely go to your counties and start advocating for specific projects that you or your organizations may want. Peer respite and peer respite housing has been really a topic that's been coming up more and more. And the state MHS OAC, the Mental Health Services Act Oversight and Accountability Commission, meets the 4th Thursday of every single month. They have public comment at every single one of those meetings. And that's a great place to start advocating for statewide change with regards to peer respite. But would that be beneficial? 100%. But unfortunately, you can't just take MHSA dollars and do whatever you want with them. You would really have to be working with your county or advocating at the state level for that. So I'd actually like to go over to Steve McNally. He has his hand raised. We have all our questions in our chat, but I want to make sure we don't miss a raised hand.
Hey, thank you.
Thank you very much. Can you all hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes, good. Love the thumbs up. Okay, I'm coming from a family with a son with serious mental illness, schizophrenia, co-occurring, and doing well today. But like most journeys, took a long time. And he's an adult son. So I'm 100% supportive of PADS. I believe in choice. So that's the emotional part for me. The rational part for me is I agree with the, and I'm a little confused with this part of it and then the OAC proposal, but I'm going to talk about both. I support the OAC proposal for the PADS part. I can't support it for my Orange County Chorus technology part because I think it's a ton of money for I'm not really sure what's going on. So I can write a PAD today, and what was said at the earlier presentation, one of the presenters had one for 10 years. So what I don't see happening here is a statewide effort that's shared funding where we accept the fact that PADS are great, but they're not honored when presented. And I don't see the hospitals joining in here. I don't see the providers joining in here. I don't see the psychiatrists joining in here. And it's not a problem of, I don't know, I can't do a PAD. So to be honest, very few providers have ever offered it or asked for it. So there's internal problems, but that's not the OAC project. So the rational part for me is I can write one today. And what's stopping me? If it's awareness and research, that's relatively small amounts of dollars. So, and I'm just afraid again, California, we were late to the party on peers. We're late to the party on this. We make things so complicated. And this is a really, until you have trust with mental illness journeys, you don't really get much accomplished. So I guess there's not really a question. The question, I guess, is where are the people that need to be here to implement it? And who really disagrees with PADS? is there anybody who's actually disagreeing? I mean, even Disability Rights has something from 2005 saying pads are great. So I don't know. Just one person's opinion, maybe I'm totally off base, but I just don't think the people that need to be here are here. So have they been asked and not come, or where are they?
I'd just like to mention, so this is our 6th presentation. And in our first 3, they were very heavy with providers and in our specific counties. And Fresno actually has a few providers that are already, Fresno started this in 2019 as the only county. And so the innovation project was actually approved in 2019. We just have the opportunity now to make it a multi-county project and move forward at a bigger capacity. And so part of it though, and part of this project is, even though you say it's a small dollar amount in order to engage our community, it's a very lengthy process because it's not one and done. And you can't just do a presentation and say, oh, everyone's bought in. So the idea of this project really is it's not about buy-in, it's about engagement. It's about truly understanding, I as a provider am going to provide pads in my organization. I as a provider am going to provide information to get out to the peers or the families. I as a provider am going to help support, whether it's law enforcement as the provider or hospitals are the provider. And speaking of hospitals, Blue Cross, Kaiser have actually wanted to have pads. They have been in conversations with NAMI California and are actually very interested in how to engage with pads and understand pads. And I think part of the problem is we haven't ever had a consistent message through our state. Each county has done what they wanted to do. Each county has tried it before. Multiple counties in our state have tried it before and have fallen on their face. And part of it is because there hasn't been to have at where we are already 6 different presentations and to be able to go forward with even more presentations. And the one fundamental flaw is the aspect of, it's not about, I have a pad. It is, how do people access that pad? If I'm in San Diego and I've done a pad and I go to San Francisco and nobody can access it because guess what? I don't have my paperwork. That's what that platform is. That platform is the ability.
Could I interrupt you for a second?
Sure.
I'm sorry.
No,
Because you don't have to sell me on it. I'm really familiar with it. But I'm still wondering, this thing started in 1990, right? Advanced directives.
Yeah.
So where has everybody been since then? And the question I asked Lori, and it wasn't clear the first time around, what is stopping? Isn't there a federal law? So what is stopping me? Why can't I get my pad honored in California? That's the question I want to know. Like, why can't somebody just say, oh, you have a pad, but I'm not going to honor it? So put it in a cloud, put it anywhere. But if I'm not going to honor it, that's a whole different issue.
Absolutely.
So why can't it be honored? That's my.
Well, and that is exactly this project, is to stop that. By the end of this project, we should never have that question again, honestly.
That's a legal issue. Do we need a law in California? What do we need?
Maybe. And I think that's part of what we're doing. Mr. McNally, the sentence that you said that really struck me was, California's been late to the party. I think what Kieran has talked about, and what I'm sure Laurie will talk about in a second, is a way to make sure that doesn't happen here. That if we were late to the party initially, well, this time we're going to throw it. And here's what we're going to do. We are going to take away that county by county, mindset by mindset. Maybe if I'm here, my pad will get thought of. Maybe if I'm here, it won't. We're going to set up a system, we hope, with legislation, with policy, with practice, that makes sure that I don't have to carry around legal paper in my pocket for my pad to get noticed. I can say, or I can make it clear, we can have a system where pads can be uploaded by me and with my permission ahead of time, I would hope, downloaded by someone else so that it can be complied with. And again, I stress the difference between enforceability and applicability. And here's why. I was just chatting with someone on this exact issue. What we should want to do, what mental health professionals should want to do, is provide the best possible supports and services at the least possible cost, not just in money, but in person power. And if someone knows that I don't do well with antipsychotics, but it's already been noted that this works or that works, then by following that pad, we are saving time, trouble, and providing better supports and services. So the entire goal here is to make sure that there is a mechanism for appropriate care to be both aware of and provided. Laurie?
So, okay, Steve, I remember your question from before, and I remember I was doing something in my bedroom, and I thought, oh my gosh, I have an answer, and I knew it was going to happen like hours and hours later. But to kind of, if I don't end up answering your question or I'm going off, please let me know, because that can happen. Going back to 1990, there are a number of reasons that pads haven't worked, right? My personal opinion is that there have been two major barriers. The first major barrier has been people haven't been creating them for a variety of reasons. And that's where the outreach component and the method of creation of the pad is so critical. And that's why peers are so instrumental and key to pads. If a person, for example, let's say I'm in a hospital and I've been involuntarily hospitalized, or I've just come out of a hospital where I was involuntarily hospitalized, I'm not probably going to want to create a pad that's a document based on self-determination if it's offered to me by an institution or by human beings who are involved in having me involuntarily hospitalized. So I think that there's been a big problem there where the people who have been in the past traditionally trying to implement pads have not been a group of people who are trusted by the people who need to fill out the pads, okay, for the people who need to create them. When it comes to the other thing is like with what we see here. So we can help, Claudia and Paul can work with someone and create the best pad ever. But if no one is seeing it and using it, it doesn't matter, which is what you're saying, right? Is that I can create a pad, but if no one's going to use it, then it has no value. And so that's why I think there has to be a combination. There's no magic pill, just like there's not a magic pill for anything, right? I think there needs to be a combination of the outreach component, the method of creation being done in a way where there's true agency and there's problem solving, education for the different entities, because you're right. The different entities are not raising their hands going, woohoo, give me pads, all right, over here. However, there are reasons for them that it's in their best interest. There are monetary reasons. I find those are often quite persuasive. There are monetary reasons for using pads and across the system. The other thing when it comes to kind of enforceability in kind of what you're getting at, I think, is that when so once there's education and the different entities, the different parts of the system can see, you know what, this person would be doing better if this entity over here had respected their pad. Like they didn't do it. And so now we've got this problem. So there's a method, there's a mechanism of horizontal accountability there, because if I'm the jail, right, and I know that the pad has not been respected, and that's why this individual ended up in jail, then now that person is, now they're in my jail, they're costing money, and now they're getting more sick. And if the reason is that another entity has not respected the pad, then that's a mechanism of horizontal accountability. When it comes to direct legal advocacy, I think that there is a need for a pad for legislation specifically in California, because, and Jonathan can speak to this, it is very difficult when it comes to legal repercussions to go straight to the federal and then challenge, why is this not being respected as this part of this person's choices and ADA and that kind of stuff. Those are difficult lawsuits. and they require a lot of resources and they take a long time. And so I think that while there is a potential for what you're talking about, I think we can get to the end result that we're seeking and that you're expressing that you're expressing the desire for before we get to that point. And I think that this is the most productive way to get there too. I had initially, before I started working with PADS, my thought was exactly where you are, where I was like, okay, well, this is an option. But what a PAD can actually do is really, if it's being used and enforced or really being used, it can demonstrate the power of following the person's wishes from the best interest, not just of the human being, but of that part of the system. So there's that horizontal accountability there as well. I think I've gone a little bit off track. I'm not sure if I answered your question. Okay, I did my best. So forgive me if I blame my scatterbrain today.
Dr. Schwartz, I wonder if you could speak a bit to this. I know we talked a little bit yesterday about it being a win-win for all the people involved.
Right. I think just to go back to what Lori said, I think that was a good, a good way to think about, well, what's it take to make this real? We can all have aspirations about PADS, but to make them effective, if you think about a PAD as a communication device, we're sending a message, it has to be received and then implemented. And so, we got to get PADS made so that they're out there. They need to be accessible, but then there needs to be real system change so that hospital systems, providers recognize their obligation under the Patient Self-Determination Act. And, as Lori was saying, if there's a complaint to CMS about non-compliance with the PAD, that institution is threatened with loss of reimbursement because that's a condition of participation in Medicaid and Medicare. But we need to have a culture in which people recognize that the Patient Self-Determination Act also applies to mental health care. And so that's an issue both for the CMS scrutiny, for people to complain to CMS, but there's also JCHO needs to start to use that in their surveillance of hospitals to survey on that and make sure that there are PADs and there are PAD policies and people are respecting them. So, there's a culture change, and then downstream, there's an enforcement issue. And, medical advance directives have become part of the culture in this country. We're a few years behind it, but we sort of need to follow that trajectory so that psychiatric advance directives have that same status. So, we just need to plug away and work at all these, points on the trajectory of making them real.
Thank you all very much. Thank you, Steve. I see Susan Keller has her hand raised. Love to hear another voice in this conversation. Susan, are you here?
Yes, I am. I had a few issues related to the conversation that's been going on here. Since the early 90s, I've been involved with the movement to integrate advanced care planning into the healthcare delivery system in California. And in the around 2016, began working specifically on developing peer-led planning tools for making mental health care wishes known within the existing advanced healthcare directive probate and what that allows by law in California. And we worked with the Coalition for Compassionate Care of California, which has led the statewide effort. integrating advanced care planning and across the system in California. And there's a lot there that can be learned and integrated into this effort. And also in that regard, the California Healthcare Foundation with the State Coalition for Compassionate Care has funded a advanced healthcare or POLST e-registry. So they already have pioneered that with a few counties for a few years, figuring out all the logistics of making a medical directive available across the spectrum of healthcare. And that all should be tapped into in this program. And I know in your abstract in item 4 and your proposal, item 5, it says about aligning mental health pads with medical directives. So physical and mental health needs are equally addressed, but I don't see that and how that would work in your work plan. So anyway, I want to advocate that you explore what already is going on in this regard in communities like ours, Sonoma County, and with the California Coalition for Compassionate Care and the California Healthcare Foundation, so that you're optimizing the potential for all the groundbreaking work that went before in terms of system change and integration, and also to benefit from the work making these mental health supportive care plans or PADS a part of the advanced healthcare directive currently, so that they currently can have legal force of law and be implemented while you're working on putting the other stuff in place.
Thank you so much. That is wonderful information. Karen, can you speak?
No,
a little
actually,
bit?
I think that's excellent information. And this is a testament to why we need these conversations that we're having today. My expertise is in the mental health world, and so being able to have you be able to give me some of this information is awesome and amazing, because this is really what we want to do, is to be able to look at what's out there, partner with organizations, and looked at to see how do we really look at a whole person. And so I appreciate the names. And I actually will probably add a little bit more verbiage to looking at which communities to and which organizations to involve. So I especially thank you for putting those into the chat. I was trying to write as you were talking, so I see that you have those in the chat. So thank you.
Yeah, and I also would like to add, when you're reviewing your proposal in this light, that you might also include some funding for those of us who have been working at this, so that you can involve them in a way that compensates some for the tremendous amount of knowledge and expertise and resources that they could bring into this for you.
Thank you.
I'm just scrolling through here. You bear with me. There's a lot of comments.
I was gonna say, while you're doing that, Chris,
Yeah,
I think it's
thank
a
you.
really good comment that we can highlight is again from Paula Aiello, who is rapidly becoming my muse. And I just kind of wish you were on this panel instead of me, because everything I'm thinking you say better. And her most recent comment goes to a lot of the other questions that were asked about how are we going to know that PADS will be followed? How are we going to know that people will respect them? How are we going to know that they work? She says this: the more common PADS become, the more they're executed and used, the more they will become normalized. In California, not that many years ago, living trusts were unheard of and banks were very wary of them. Now almost everyone has one and every institution has a way to deal with them. Amen. that's again part of the reason of why we're here. Mr. McNally is right. This is too long in coming, and the party should have been going on a long time ago. But we have a chance to get in and to lead it and to make sure that people understand it. Part of this project is also outreach and information, creating accessible material for people so that we're not just saying, here's a pad, follow it. We're saying, here's why a pad is a good thing. Here's why you should follow it. Here's why you should use one. And here's why you should comply with them. With the idea being that these will become as common as living trusts are, as powers of attorney are, so that this becomes the way that people understand and react when they're needed. And that only happens if we start from somewhere. And Mr. McNally, again, you were right. We should have started a long time ago. The good news is that there is incredible brain power in this project. I'm just thrilled to be a part of it, to work with people who are so deeply entrenched in this, and that this is where, to use my bad analogy, we're not just going to join the party, we're going to throw it for the rest of the country.
Thank you, Jonathan. I see a hand raised from Howard Zonana. Dr. Zonana, great to see you.
Hi.
Hi. I remember you. Remember from when I was at Yale Law School. How are you doing?
Yep. Okay.
Great.
I just wanted to say, speaking from a point of view of not in California, but Connecticut, there certainly has been a sea change around that. Most of our hospitals are looking to get advanced directives. The problem is most of these things are still usually nuanced. While it's nice to have preferences, obviously, if a person can say, I'd prefer to go to this hospital and I don't want to go to that hospital, you're stuck in a certain way if there are no beds at the other hospital and things like that. So that those are always somewhat limitations. And even when things are written, I can say from being on the ethics committee at Yale New Haven, it doesn't resolve a lot of questions. People can have advanced directives, but then family members come in and they want certain kinds of treatment. You try to follow what the person wants, but if that was given 5 years ago, then it can be a little hard to know how accurate that is and to try to negotiate those things. So we're forever in the midst of trying to deal with it, and doctors try to follow, but you can't do what you think is bad practice either. So there's always a degree of negotiation that have to go on around these things, and I think that's important to remember.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. You make very good points. And there's a common sense component to this, right? I mean, in some places, maybe there's the ability to choose, like, so for example, here, when we do pads here, in some places, if there's a choice of a hospital, like in San Antonio, they are able sometimes to be able to go along with what the person wants and take to a certain hospital. In other places, that's not possible. So obviously, if it's not possible, it's not possible. So, kind of the common sense approach to that. When it comes to at least some of the other issues that you have raised, I think that's why the mechanism for the creation of the pad is so critical, because the way that the pad is created and what ends up being inside of it is very important to its ability to be able to be used most effectively. So I think that those were good points.
Howard, I'd jump in and say, one of the reasons in the work we do in North Carolina is to really encourage the appointment of a very knowledgeable healthcare agent or the healthcare power of attorney, is so that person can understand what the preferences are of that person and try to make decisions based on their preferences. Now, that doesn't solve the problem of some of these thorny issues about how do you wade through conflicting preferences, but it sure helps to have a knowledgeable healthcare agent who understands and can put themselves in the shoes of the person who executed the pad and try to most faithfully address their preferences. But some of these ethical dilemmas are very thorny and are true for medical advance directives. as well when you have maybe multiple family members who are disagreeing. So, you know, but I think those are real issues.
I guess I just quickly would like to add that you made a point that, well, what happens if somebody made a PAD like 5 years ago and, you know, that's no longer accurate information. I believe that in Texas, we update it every 3 years, right, Lori? Yeah, 3 years. And the thing too is that as you walk, you know, as someone that has lived experience, there's things that worked like last year that no longer work for me. And so I'm able to come up and say like, you know what, I think I really want to change this part of my path because it's no longer representative of my recovery and what works well for me. And I have that right as somebody that owns a pad. I can change it at any time. And that's kind of one of the beauties of it.
Thank you so much, Claudia and Howard. I'm going to ask Rachel to maybe talk about this next question. Does a project include peers as part of the contract? And I know you just had a peer listening session just the other day. Can you talk about the peer involvement, Rachel?
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. Peers, as others mentioned, are crucial to the grassroots advocacy and coalition building that will need education. We had a listening session where there were about 75 peers that, you know, asked questions related to some of the same things that you all had mentioned. And one of the consistent things that we said over and over is that peers are the ones that are going to be the ones to make it happen and meet people where they're at. So it's very important that we include people with lived experience. As Tristan mentioned, like it was a peer that first really was engaging him about his choices in medication and choices in treatment. So we hope that peers will be continuing to be in the conversation. Peers are asking more questions. I think from the last session, the common theme was that people were ready to put it on mugs, ready to get the word out, ready to tell more people about it. So from what I'm witnessing on the ground, because we're grassroots peer coalition builders, that peers like fundamentally agree with PADS, but want to ensure that it's enforceable, that their choice is being heard, and that someone that's supporting them with their choice in this document, that they understand them and that they can meet them where they're at. So there's also 2 more peer listening sessions that'll be happening, one with Cher and Campro on May 26th and June 5th. And you'll really get to hear the voice of peers. And peers even noted that they want to be included every step of the way in this project. And I believe that that's really, from the lessons learned, we know that that's going to be the only way that this happens. So peers are critical, and it looks like that peers are written, counties will be hiring peer organizations, and there'll be a peer organization hopefully to do more advocacy work, but there definitely needs to be coalition building. From what I've saw as early in doing this coalition building work, it's going to take a lot of time and effort to meet all the disability rights organizations, these statewide organizations, and really begin to get a plan together to really do education, really talk to policymakers, providers, but it's going to take major coalition building. And that's why I agree with the OAC's proposal to really include a peer organization that's really ready to meet the state agencies across the board.
Thank you, Rachel. I've got some questions from Steve. So what happens if a psychiatric care section is added to an advanced directive? Would it be honored? The question 2, he's got 3, are PADS part of the Cal-AIM discussion? And question 3, SMI phone app launched by SAMHSA. I know that Dr. Schwartz was a part of that effort. What was the acceptance level? Downloads, does it have a cloud feature?
So I think I'll just take the very first one, and then Jonathan may have something to add to it, which is that I don't see any reason that a mental health component could not be attached to a medical advance directive. However, and also the laws for medical advance directives are pretty good. But I do think that having a standalone PAD statute could really enable some very directed and focused, principle-based legislation that would help improve the ability for PADS to do what they need to do. So the answer is yes, I think it can. I think I see no reason why it couldn't be. There could not be a mental health component. So, for example, I have a brother with a serious mental illness, and he lives in a state that doesn't have a PAD statute, but they do have an advanced directive statute. So what we're doing there is pulling the mental health component under the advanced directive. However, there are tons of advantages to being able to have a PAD specific legislation, depending on, of course, the devil in the details of legislation, as it always is. So I'll pass the other questions because I don't have those answers.
Just following up on Laurie's comment, and Mr. McNally, I think you make a great point. I'm not a California barred attorney, so this is not legal advice, but my position is this: mental health care is health care. Period. End of quote. And if I have a healthcare advance directive or power of attorney, and I'm specifying what needs to be done for my mental health care, I see no functional difference between saying what should happen should I experience psychosis any more than what should happen should I experience a heart attack. I have written powers of attorney in other states where I am barred around the idea of supported decision-making that says what should be done if I'm not able to make decisions. Sounds a lot like a PAD, where I can say in advance, if I'm not able to make decisions, I want you, Mr. McNally, to make them for me this way. You will not agree to ECT. You will never agree that I should be forcibly given Haldol. You will make decisions that are consistent with things that I have told you before or that you have discussed with me first. That's the beauty of a PAD or any other power of attorney, as opposed to, say, conservatorship. We can set up what that looks like and how it is to be done. So that's just my view on PADs and their enforceability. I think Kieran can speak better as to the SAMHSA app, but what I know about that app is it requires a smartphone, which lots of folks don't have, especially people who are experiencing homelessness. And I believe that limited adoption and use. Kieran, is that accurate?
Correct. And so it's in the app store. So you would have to have the ability to download either in your Microsoft app or your Apple app. And it's my understanding they don't put a lot of the metrics out or analytics, but it's my understanding that since October of since the release, here I have it on, I took a screenshot. Since the release on April 8th, 2020, so a year ago, there's been just over 1,000 downloads with no reviews. And that one is limited to what we're looking at. Obviously, we're looking at something that's a lot more accessible, and that a person would not have to have a smartphone on them, and that individual would not have to give that phone to a hospital, an emergency department, or law enforcement in that moment. So,
I think Marvin, you were somewhat involved in that app process.
Yeah. I think all the points are well taken about its limited, its limitations. And to my knowledge, it hasn't been tested, that you can put an app out, but does it meet people's needs? Who can do it? Who's it work for? We have made suggestions that it be tested. The other piece to realize is that usually you have to then witness and notarize your advanced directive. And so using that app, you'd have to export whatever you create and print it out and witness and notarize it. So it's a little clunky in that way. I'm not sure it was I did help, but it wasn't my idea.
Well, and then just to expand a little on that, I really actually appreciate that, because that is something that we looked at with that app. And we wanted to take, the positive side of that app, but to be able to really utilize it in California and to be able to create the online digital signature so that we don't have to worry about downloading a paper document, but to literally be able to do a digital signature. It also will be a training site as well. So you can download videos, training material, the actual pad as well. And the nice thing about innovations with MHSA, here's the one advantage. This isn't just money to build a platform. We actually will have evaluation with it, because exactly what Dr. Schwartz is saying is we want to be able to evaluate that it's truly useful, that those that need access to it can easily access to it. Those that need to input or upload a pad can easily input and upload a pad, because there's no reason to have a platform if we can't use it, because ultimately, we're California, we're a little selfish. We would like all the states to use it as well, so that as folks are leaving California, we would love their pads to follow them, and it's a cloud base. And so it won't be stuck to an app or a phone. So there are some advantages to looking at it, and to really take exactly what SAMHSA tried to do and improve.
Yeah, I would say those are great comments. I would add that the nice thing about putting it on a state-specific platform is you can, make it more specific. But the other thing is, and we've worked on this in North Carolina, is you can then embed little videos or things or different, well, what does this mean? And then you'd have a video that the person could toggle to. So you can make it much more user-friendly.
Great, thank you. It is 11:30, and Chris, you are on mute.
Hello?
Okay, thank you, Karen. I'd like to hear from Susan Keller just a little bit, and then we have some closing statements from Ellen. I wish we could have gotten to everybody's question, but it is great to have so much interest and feedback. Susan?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that there's legislation in the works to enable online signing of advanced healthcare directives and POST. And it's being led by the Coalition for Compassionate Care, and I can be in touch with Karen about that after.
That's just great. Ellen, would you like to make a few closing remarks?
Yeah, I would. Thank you. So I just want to say a few short words. The symposium that we had was, in my prejudiced view, really phenomenal. We had speakers from all spaces in the mental health spectrum, including people with lived experience and families, providers, researchers, and so on. Gathering together in one place, all these people make for an interesting and important conversation. Today, we had the Q&A portion of our event. Again, the presenters did a great job finding these questions. And perhaps most important were the questioners themselves, what they wanted to know and why. Questions were very thoughtful, interesting, and at times subtle. They range, well, we talked about different things today, involuntary commitment and outpatient commitment, self-determination, and we heard the peer voice about their experience of these things, and we heard a suggestion that we have peers involved in all of these issues, which I totally agree with. I don't think anyone understands as well as a fellow sufferer what it's like to have mental illness or cancer or anything else. So our hope is that our work together on SDM and PADS will lead to more people being the architects of their own lives, basically. As someone who has had choice taken away from her in the past, this is a great gift. So again, I would like to thank our most resourceful presenters, as well as the people who have joined these events and the excellent questions they had. I'd also like to thank our wonderful Chris Schneiders, director of the Sachs Institute, who did all the heavy lifting in putting this program together. Thank you, Chris. And so I look forward to staying connected with you all around the work that we're doing on SDM and PADS. I think that there's great potential for these products, and I'm excited about working on them with you together. Thank you again. And as we say at USC, bye-bye.
Happy graduation, USC. Thank you, everyone.
Yes, thanks so much. Let's keep this conversation going, and really appreciate all the great information and insight from everyone who joined us today.
I'd like to just ask our team, I'm going to close the Zoom. If you would like to, just for our team, if you'd like to have a conversation afterwards, please just relog on. So I am ending the Zoom now.
I just want to thank you all for the opportunity to provide an opinion. I believe in the pads, but you know, California has a lot of obstacles, and the elephants in the room aren't in the room, or they don't appear to be in the room. And the only person that's getting hurt by a lot of this is the ill individual and the families. And they're at the center of the OAC, the MHSA money. And I think the counties have sort of forgotten that. One person's opinion, because we spend a ton of money, and we could have spent $100 million in community planning last year, every year for almost the last 10 years, understand capacity, awareness, and they spent less than 25 million or so. And it's not very well coordinated. So maybe Karen could help us get the CPHDA in the discussion in an honest way. I know that since I'm not a provider and I'm not looking for contracts, I'm not conflicted, nor do I need to be, you know, I don't like to say things to be mean, and I can't control how people hear it. But there is a block that sits with 59 behavioral health directors who can or cannot make things happen in the state, because most of the electeds are hands off when it comes to approving these plans. So please help us with that. I mean, I've asked the OAC the same question. Everyone is so conflicted and congenial that they forget the only person that's getting hurt is the sick individual. And there's very few people in this state that can speak without a filter. And I think the people at the top of the pyramid are much closer to the families and the consumers than all the filters in between. So, and I'm not saying it in an angry way, you know, sometimes frustration can sound like anger. I'm not angry. I wouldn't waste my time trying to help things. But let's get on with it. Let's add a little urgency and let's call it out. You know, if they don't want to do it, I have no problem. Just honestly say, I don't want to do something and I haven't wanted to do it, and I'll accept it. But don't tell people around the state that you want to do stuff, not this project, but just in general, you want to do stuff and never do it. So anyway, this legislation is very tricky, and my county lost $140 million in that No Place Like Home because they like to look good and they undercount the homeless. And, you know, that's direct service. And we need housing, but the expensive way we do in California, we lose a lot of direct service. So anyway, thank you for listening. Keep what you like, toss the rest. Anything you like came directly from Lori Hallmark. Anything you hated came from me. And you guys have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Mike Valley.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to end this. Thank you.